All right, let's get into something truly fascinating. For basically all of human history, we've looked up at the stars and seen this silent, beautiful show. But what if one of those stars wasn't silent at all? What if it had a name, a very ancient name that perfectly described a sound we wouldn't be able to hear for another 1400 years? That's what we're exploring today, an incredible link between a 7th century text and a discovery that changed modern astronomy. For millennia, our whole connection to the universe was visual. It was all about sight. Every story, every constellation, it was all based on these silent points of light. This question right here is what turned everything upside down. What happens when we stop just looking at the cosmos and we actually start listening? And this is where our story really kicks off. The year is 1967. Picture it. For all of human history, the sky has been completely silent. But then, armed with new radio telescopes, we hear something impossible. A signal from the depths of space that was so steady, so rhythmic, it sounded like a knock on a cosmic door. What's so wild about this is what the scientists who found it decided to call it. The signal was so regular, so artificial sounding that the astrophysicist Jocelyn Bell Burnell and her team half-jokingly nicknamed it LGM-1. That stood for Little Green Men. I mean, they seriously had to consider for a moment that they just found proof of aliens. As cool as that would have been, science demanded a natural explanation. So the big mystery became, what in the universe could possibly create a signal so precise, so perfect, that you could mistake it for an alien beacon? What was out there, knocking? Well, the answer turned out to be something maybe even weirder than aliens: a pulsar. A pulsar is the collapsed, super-dense core left over after a giant star explodes. To give you an idea of how insane that is, imagine taking our entire sun and crushing it down to the size of a city that's spinning hundreds of times every single second. That was the source of the knock. So, how does a spinning star create a knocking sound? It's all because of this cosmic lighthouse effect. It's a perfect analogy. The pulsar is spinning like crazy, and it's shooting out these focused beams of energy from its poles. So, just like a lighthouse, every time that beam sweeps past Earth, our radio telescopes pick up a little blip, a pulse. And since it's spinning at a constant speed, that pulse is perfectly regular. And here is the absolute key to this whole thing. When scientists take those radio pulses and convert them into a sound we can actually hear, it isn't a gentle hum. It's not a cosmic whistle. It is a sharp, distinct, percussive sound. It sounds like a knock or a hammer, over and over and over again. And this is where the story takes a massive turn, away from modern science and deep into the ancient past. We have a star that makes a knocking sound. But what if I told you that a star had already been given a name, the Knocker, long before we had any possible way of hearing it? So let's wind the clock back, way back. We're going to the 7th century in the Arabian Peninsula. This is a time long before radio telescopes, before we even knew that stars were giant balls of fire. And it's here that an ancient text, the Quran, is being revealed. And inside that text, there's a chapter named after something in the sky called At-Tariq. Now, in Arabic, this isn't some vague, poetic name. It literally translates to the one who knocks, the one who pounds. It's the word you'd use for a visitor who shows up in the dead of night and hammers on your door. And here are the verses themselves. An oath is being sworn by the sky and the nightcomer, which is At-Tariq. But then it gets a second description, a second name that's just as strange, the piercing star. Let's just break down the language here because the choice of words is incredibly specific. Tariq comes from the root word tarak, which means to strike, to pound, to hammer. It's an action word, a sound word. And the second name, asakib, comes from a root that means to pierce or to penetrate, like driving a nail through a piece of wood. And that right there is this central mystery we're talking about. You have a modern discovery in 1967 of a star that makes a rhythmic knocking sound and shoots out piercing radiation. And then you have a 1,400-year-old text that names a star, the Knocker, and the piercing one. How is that even possible? I mean, just look at this when you put it side by side. It is honestly stunning. Modern science finds a star emitting a knocking sound. The ancient text names a star the Knocker. Science says its signal is a hammering pulse. The ancient text uses a root word that means to hammer. Science finds it emits piercing X-rays. The ancient text calls it the piercing one. The parallels are just incredibly direct. So, what are we supposed to make of all this? Well, like with any mystery this profound, there are basically two main ways people look at it. Let's walk through both of them. Okay, so the skeptical view is that this is simply beautiful poetry, not literal science. In this interpretation, Tariq could be any bright star that appears at night, knocking on the darkness with its light, like a late-night visitor. The piercing part is just a metaphor for how incredibly bright it is. It's a literary device, not a physics lecture. But the other argument zeroes in on just how specific the language is. The question is, why Tariq? Why choose a word that's all about sound, about impact and hammering, to describe something that for 14 centuries was only a point of light? There are plenty of words in Arabic for shining or bright, but that's not what was chosen. This view says the name isn't a metaphor. It's a literal description of a property we couldn't detect until 1967. And this is where we really have to leave it for you to think about. Is the connection between the pulsar and At-Tariq just one of the most mind-blowing coincidences in history, or does it suggest a source of knowledge that was far beyond the reach of anyone in the 7th century? Whatever you conclude, one thing is for sure. That quiet, peaceful night sky we all grew up with, well, it's not quiet at all. We now know the universe is alive with sound. It's humming, it's chirping, and in some of its darkest corners, it's knocking. And maybe, just maybe, its name was waiting for us to hear it all along.